Hello everybody. So this video is all about attachment styles. So an attachment style is the kind of working mental model that people have about how people behave in relationships, how people behave towards us in relationships, and we use these styles as kind of a default for our expectations about our relationships, and that kind of give us some guidance as to how we should behave in our relationships. So our attachment styles inform us a little bit about what we can expect from our partners and how we should react towards our partners. But again, they work as a kind of a working mental model about how relationships work. How much can you depend on a partner, and how much should you invest in a partner? All right. Now, attachment style is largely born out of a couple people's work. First, Bowlby and Ainsworth. Now, these researchers focused on infant-parent interactions largely. And what they found was, depending upon how infants and parents interacted, especially during the first year of life, could generate attachment styles much later in life. So when parents are consistent. Well, let me back up a little bit. The general idea is that children learn that their environments have a certain degree of threat in them. So some environments are safer than others. And regardless of how much threat there is, when they feel any threat, they look to their parents. And how their parents respond to that threat, and that threat doesn't necessarily have to be like, violence or something. It could be problems, hunger, things like that. General problems like hunger or discomfort. They look to their parents, and how their parent responds, especially during that first year, tends to create or start the formation of an attachment style or a mental model about how our relationship partners react to us. If those parents are highly available and they're reliable in their care, they're consistent in the provision of care when children request it, usually by crying, then these children, after that first year, actually cry less on average, because, again, they seem to have learned that their parents are reliable caregivers. When these people grow up, actually, before we get to that, they also tend to react to their parents in specific ways when their parents leave and when they come back. When their parents leave, they do tend to be distressed, but they tend to recover fairly quickly. And when their parent returns, they tend to be very happy about the return, and they tend to engage in all sorts of attachment behaviors. They'll go towards the infant, they'll want to be held by the infant, and they'll want to bond with, or they'll want to be held by the parent, and they'll want to bond with the parent. However, if parents are inconsistent in their care of the child, so they don't always reliably respond to the child when they're crying, then they adopt a different kind of develop a different kind of working mental model about how their relationship partners will interact with them. So these infants, when their parent leaves, they tend to be distraught, and then when they come back, they show kind of an ambiguous reaction to the parent. They will both try to engage in attachment behavior, so they'll try to cuddle and go towards the parent, but at the same time they also seem resistant to the parent, like they're almost kind of mad at the parent. And then in the third style, if the parents tend to be kind of rejecting of the child, and so they're consistently not responding to the child when the child experiences some form of threat. These children, they tend to become somewhat indifferent. So when the parent leaves, they tend to not respond much, and then when the parent comes back, they tend to not respond much, because essentially they've learned that they can't rely on their caregiver. Now, each of these kind of working mental models are an attachment style. So those who have learned that they can rely on their parent, and although they're distraught when they're gone, they're happy when they come back, they develop a secure attachment style. Those who have inconsistent care from their parents, and so they cry when their parent leaves, but they're kind of mixed as how to react when their parent returns. So they're resistant, but at the same time they attach. These have an anxious attachment style. And then those who kind of react to their parents in a different manner, those who don't seem to care much when their parent leaves and don't seem to care much when their parent returns, they have an avoidant attachment style. Now these attachment styles, because they work as they serve as working mental models for relationships, they get carried through into adulthood. And so we tend to use these attachment styles with our relationship partners in adulthood. And so you have people who are securely attached, anxiously attached, and avoidantly attached. And each of them react differently in relationships. So people who have secure attachment styles, they tend to be more trusting of their relationship partners. They tend to find getting into relationships being fairly easy. They're not necessarily quick to get into relationships, but they don't experience a whole lot of reluctance or hesitation to commit to a particular relationship. So they're high in trust. They also tend to be high in self-esteem. And they tend to develop longer and more mature and healthier relationships with their partners. Those with anxious attachment styles, on the other hand, they tend to be very quick to get into relationships, sometimes overly quick, but the entire time they seem to have this kind of ambiguous cognitive behavioral style. Specifically, they may really want to attach to the partner, all the while constantly fearing that their relationship partner do not return their affection. And then your avoidant individuals with an avoidant attachment style, they tend to assume that their affections won't be returned. So they're reluctant to even enter into a relationship. So they tend to avoid relationships, and they tend to avoid commitment. So whereas the securely attached tend to be high in trust and high in self-esteem, the anxiously attached tend to be low in trust and low in self-esteem, and then the avoidantly attached seem to be high in self-esteem but low in trust. All right, and those are your three different attachment styles. Now, one last comment. Combinations of these different attachment styles are more or less successful in relationships than others. So if you have two securely attached partners, it's going to be a fairly healthy relationship. And provided everything works out, they're going to have a happy, healthy relationship. Two anxiously attached individuals are probably going to jump into a relationship fairly quickly, but they're both going to be constantly petrified that the other doesn't actually like them. And then two avoidant individuals probably aren't going to get together because they're both going to be avoiding the relationship. Now, if you attach two securely attached individuals, like I said, that relationship's probably going to be a healthy relationship, and it's probably going to last for fairly long. But other combinations, although they might last long, they're not going to necessarily be as secure, as trusting, and as healthy as the two securely attached. Specifically, an anxious attachment style, when a anxiously attached female and an avoidantly attached male pair up, they may actually have a relationship as long as two securely attached, largely because the attachment styles of each confirm the gender stereotypes about their attachment style. In general, in America, the female stereotype includes one of women tend to be anxiously attached. They tend to be clingy. They tend to be more affectionate, or fear that men don't care about them. I'm not saying any of these things are true. I'm just saying that's the stereotype of women's behavior in relationships. The stereotype of men in relationships is that they are hyper avoidant, so they don't want to commit. They're committophobes, you might even hear some people say. And so you have a stereotype of men, a gender stereotype of men's attachment styles, and a gender stereotype of women's attachment styles. And when you have an avoidant man and an anxious female, they may get into a relationship, and the relationship may last very long because each are confirming the expectations of the other. But this relationship probably isn't going to be the most satisfying. It probably isn't going to be the happiest. But it can last fairly long. That is all I wanted to mention about attachment styles. So again, what we reviewed are 3 different attachment styles, the caregiver relationships of each that is associated with each attachment style, and then what the adult behavior patterns typical of each attachment style are. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about how these attachment styles might influence relationships. And that is it for this video. If you have any questions, please send them my way. Other than that, take it easy.